Picture this, a bustling restaurant filled with the sounds of clinking glasses and soft chatter. At the center of the dining room, a wealthy woman sits at a table, her demeanor commanding attention. Her voice cuts through the air, sharp and dismissive, as she waves off the waitress with an air of entitlement. The waitress, her face calm but her eyes quietly resolute, walks away, her composure unshaken despite the sting of the words hurled at her. But then the air shifts. The wealthy woman's laughter falters as her gaze lands on a photograph tucked into the hostess stand. A picture of the waitress smiling warmly, standing arm in arm with the restaurant owner. Her smile freezes, her hands tighten around the edge of the table. She blinks, as though trying to reconcile what she's just seen. In an instant, her world of assumptions begins to crumble. But how did it come to this? And what happened next? To understand, we must go back to the beginning of this extraordinary story. This story begins in an elegant restaurant, a place known for its charm, sophistication, and impeccable service. It was the kind of establishment where the city's elite came to dine, their conversations mixing with the soft clinking of glasses and the low hum of music. On this particular evening, the restaurant was bustling. Among the staff was Claire, a diligent waitress, who carried herself with quiet grace. Claire wasn't just hard-working, she was exceptional at what she did. Every plate she served was delivered with a warm smile, every order taken with precision. To most patrons, she was simply part of the seamless experience the restaurant provided. Seated at one of the prime tables was Meredith Astor, a familiar face at the restaurant. Meredith was a woman of wealth and influence, always dressed in designer clothes that subtly announced her status. She was the kind of patron who demanded perfection in everything, from the temperature of her wine to the way her napkin was folded. But tonight, Meredith seemed especially demanding. Her voice, sharp and authoritative, cut through the pleasant atmosphere as she pointed out perceived flaws in her experience. Her companions laughed politely, though some exchanged uneasy glances. Claire approached Meredith's table with the same professional demeanor she extended to every customer. Yet from the moment Meredith addressed her, it was clear she viewed Claire as less than an equal. She stalked through the room, playing with the lap of her new bra. "This water is warm," Meredith snapped, placing her glass on the edge of the table without so much as a glance at Claire. "I specifically asked for cold water." Claire maintained her composure, quickly replacing the glass with a chilled one. She apologized with practiced ease, though the dismissive wave of Meredith's hand spoke volumes. The other patrons seemed to take notice. A few watched the scene unfold from their tables, their eyes shifting between Meredith and Claire. There was a tension in the air, subtle but undeniable, as if everyone was waiting to see what would happen next. Claire returned to the kitchen, her expression unreadable. She had grown used to moments like these, where a smile and steady hands were her armor. But tonight, the weight of it seemed heavier than usual, as though the room itself was holding its breath. What Meredith didn't realize as she continued to find fault with the evening was that the night was far from ordinary. The balance of power was about to shift, in a way she could never have anticipated. And for Claire, this would be a moment she wouldn't soon forget. Claire's days were long, but she handled them with quiet determination. Every shift, she moved through the restaurant with grace, serving customers with professionalism and care. She had an uncanny ability to stay calm under pressure, even when patrons were less than kind. She was a familiar face to many regulars, though few ever stopped to wonder about her story. Claire never shared much about herself, choosing instead to focus on her work. To her co-workers, she was reliable and composed, always keeping things running smoothly. But tonight, something about the tension in the air felt different. As Claire moved between tables, balancing plates and fielding sharp remarks, her mind stayed focused. She had no time for distractions, even as the weight of the evening pressed down. Unbeknownst to anyone, this night would be a turning point for Claire and for the world of one particular patron who underestimated her. The evening was in full swing, the restaurant alive with chatter and the clinking of silverware. At her usual table, Meredith Astor, draped in an air of superiority, was surrounded by her well-dressed companions. Their conversation was filled with laughter, but Meredith's voice stood out, sharper and louder than the rest. Claire approached the table, maintaining her composed demeanor, and set down a plate in front of Meredith. Before Claire could finish serving, Meredith's voice cut through the room. "Is this supposed to be medium rare?" she asked, her tone laced with irritation as she prodded the steak with her fork. "Because it looks overcooked to me," Claire calmly responded, offering to have the dish remade. But Meredith wasn't interested in solutions. She was more focused on putting Claire in her place. "Do you even know how to do your job? Or is this the level of service I should expect here now?" she continued, loud enough for the nearby tables to hear. A few patrons glanced over, their eyes flickering between Claire and Meredith. Claire apologized, her voice steady, and reached for the plate, but Meredith waved her off dismissively. "No need. I'm already losing my appetite," she added with a dramatic sigh, leaning back in her chair. The room felt heavier now, the faint hum of conversations around the restaurant quieter than before. Claire remained professional, offering to bring something else, but Meredith barely acknowledged her, returning to her conversation as though Claire no longer existed. As Claire walked away, the weight of the encounter lingered, but she didn't let it show. The tension, however, was not lost on those who had witnessed the scene. For Claire, it was another moment she would tuck away, carrying the burden quietly. But for Meredith, her evening of satisfaction and control was far from over. What she didn't realize was that her actions had set something into motion, something she wouldn't be able to undo. Claire walked swiftly into the kitchen, her heart pounding. She set the plate down on the counter with careful hands, her face unreadable as her coworkers glanced at her with concern. Taking a moment, she stood by the prep station, inhaling deeply to steady herself. It wasn't the first time she'd been spoken to like that, and she knew it wouldn't be the last. The sting of Meredith's words lingered, but Claire refused to let it show. She straightened her apron, adjusted her hair, and stepped back into the dining room as though nothing had happened. Her expression was calm, her movements deliberate, and her composure unshaken. As she returned to her other tables, Claire continued her work with the same professionalism she'd started the evening with. She smiled at patrons, remembered their preferences, and checked on their meals, all while carrying the weight of Meredith's public insult. In moments of quiet, Claire's mind wandered briefly. She thought of how easy it would have been to snap back, or to let Meredith's words break her. But that wasn't who Claire was. She had learned long ago that her strength wasn't in retaliation, but in resilience. Nearby, Meredith seemed oblivious to the way the room had cooled slightly. While her friends chatted on, a few diners stole glances at Claire, their expressions a mix of sympathy and admiration. Though unspoken, it was clear to some that the young waitress had handled herself with dignity in a situation where many might not have. For Claire, the night continued. She moved from table to table, her head held high, her focus unwavering. She knew the best way to respond wasn't through words, but through her work, a quiet strength that couldn't be undone by the likes of Meredith Astor. But while Claire carried on as if nothing had happened, the evening was far from over. What Claire didn't know was that her unwavering resolve was about to set the stage for an unexpected turn of events. Claire carried on with her duties, maintaining her composure even as the sting of Meredith's words lingered in her mind. The dining room buzzed with activity, and Claire made every effort to focus on her other tables, offering the same warmth and professionalism she always did. But the evening took another turn. Meredith, unsatisfied with her earlier performance of power, seemed to fixate on Claire. As Claire approached the table again to refill glasses, Meredith set her sights on her once more. "Excuse me, waitress," Meredith called loudly, her tone sharp enough to silence the conversation at her table. Claire stepped closer, keeping her posture steady. "Yes, ma'am? How can I assist you?" Claire asked, her voice even. Meredith held up a fork with a single, tiny speck on it, something Claire had clearly missed during the rush of the evening. "Do you expect me to eat with this?" she said, waving the fork slightly for emphasis. "This is disgusting. Don't you people know how to do your jobs properly?" A hush fell over the immediate area as patrons nearby turned to watch the scene unfold. Claire's face remained composed, though her heart pounded in her chest. "I deeply apologize for the oversight," Claire said, taking the fork with calm hands. "I'll bring you a fresh one right away." But Meredith wasn't done. "Oh, I don't think you understand. This is unacceptable. I'm paying a lot of money to eat here, and I shouldn't have to deal with incompetence." Her words were slow and deliberate, each one dripping with condescension. Claire nodded and excused herself to replace the fork. In the kitchen, her coworkers glanced at her with concern. One of them, a server named Lily, whispered, "How do you deal with people like that?" Claire shook her head slightly, grabbing a polished fork and taking a deep breath before heading back out. "Just part of the job," she said, quietly. As Claire returned to the table and placed the new fork in front of Meredith, she offered another polite apology, but Meredith's dismissive tone continued. "Let's hope this one is actually clean," Meredith muttered loudly, ensuring those around her could hear. Claire kept her expression neutral, refusing to show any sign of frustration. She simply nodded and continued with her work, silently counting down the minutes until the shift would end. But Meredith's behavior didn't go unnoticed. The patrons at nearby tables whispered among themselves, their eyes flickering between Claire and Meredith. A quiet tension built in the room. Despite the humiliation, Claire never wavered. She maintained her professionalism, treating every table with the same level of care. Her resilience was unmistakable, even as Meredith's words echoed in her mind. Little did Meredith know, her actions would soon be brought into sharp focus. And when the truth was revealed, there would be no excuse left for her behavior. The dinner rush was beginning to slow, with the quiet murmur of conversations and the gentle clinking of glasses filling the room. Meredith sat at her table, still commanding attention with her sharp laughter and animated storytelling, her earlier treatment of Claire seemingly forgotten or dismissed as inconsequential. Claire, on the other hand, carried on with her duties, moving gracefully between tables, her professionalism unwavering despite the humiliation she had endured. She offered polite smiles, ensured her other patrons were well cared for, and continued to reset tables without a trace of resentment showing on her face. What Claire didn't know was that she had been under quiet observation for most of the evening. A man seated near the bar had watched her closely, taking note of every interaction, every moment of tension, and every sharp remark Meredith had directed at her. He sat with an air of quiet authority, blending into the background, but clearly paying close attention. Claire remained unaware of his presence as she focused on her work. Even as the weight of the evening bore down on her, she pressed forward, determined to finish her shift with the same professionalism she had started it with. As the man rose from his seat, he walked deliberately toward the hostess stand, stopping to adjust a framed photograph that had gone unnoticed by most. The picture showed Claire standing beside him, both smiling warmly. A small detail that would soon change everything. The man turned and approached Claire, who was clearing plates at a nearby table. She looked up, startled for a moment, before offering him a polite smile. "Claire," he said warmly, his voice calm but firm enough to catch the attention of those nearby. "How's everything going tonight?" "It's going fine," Claire replied softly, though there was a flicker of surprise in her expression. The man gave her a small nod before turning toward the center of the room. By now, a few diners had taken notice, their conversations softening as they watched him stride with quiet confidence. He stopped near Meredith's table, his posture relaxed, yet commanding, and addressed the room. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice carrying easily over the low hum of the restaurant. "Thank you all for dining with us tonight. It's always a pleasure to host you here." His gaze swept across the room, lingering momentarily on Meredith, whose confident demeanor began to waver. "I'd like to take a moment to recognize the incredible staff who make this restaurant what it is," he continued. "They're the backbone of everything we do, and I'm endlessly proud of their hard work and dedication." His words hung in the air, the weight of them sinking in as he paused. Then, with a faint smile, he gestured toward Claire. "And Claire here," he said, his voice softening as he looked at her, "isn't just one of the finest team members we've ever had. She also happens to be my niece." The room went silent, the truth crashing down like a wave. Meredith froze, her eyes darting between the man, Claire, and the photograph now prominently displayed at the hostess stand. The realization of her actions, and the identity of the man standing before her, hit her all at once. But the man wasn't finished. He turned to Meredith's table, his gaze steady and his tone even. "Oh, and one more thing," he added. "I should probably introduce myself. I'm Michael Carter, the owner of this restaurant." Meredith's face drained of color. Her earlier bravado evaporated as the weight of her behavior and its implications became painfully clear. Michael stepped closer to Claire, his expression softening further as he embraced her briefly. "You've handled yourself beautifully tonight, as always," he said with genuine pride. Around the room, patrons exchanged murmurs, piecing together the full weight of what had just unfolded. Claire stood quietly, momentarily stunned by the turn of events, but her uncle's presence brought her a quiet sense of vindication. Meredith, meanwhile, sat frozen in her chair, her confidence shattered. For the first time that evening, she was utterly speechless, her world of entitlement brought to a halt by a truth she hadn't anticipated. The restaurant was silent, the weight of Michael Carter's revelation settling over the room like a heavy fog. Meredith sat stiffly in her chair, her earlier confidence completely stripped away. Her companions shifted uncomfortably, unsure of where to look or what to say, while other diners watched with quiet anticipation. Michael turned toward Meredith, his expression calm but firm, and took a step closer to her table. The silence between them was heavy, but Michael's voice, steady and deliberate, broke it. "I couldn't help but notice how you treated Claire tonight," he began, his tone measured but unmistakably serious. "I sat back and observed as you raised your voice over a steak, called her competence into question over a fork, and belittled her repeatedly in front of everyone here." Meredith looked down at her plate, her fingers tightening around the edge of her napkin. She didn't dare meet Michael's gaze. "You see," Michael continued, his voice steady but carrying an undeniable authority, "what you might not realize is that every person working in this restaurant, every server, every chef, every dishwasher, is someone's son, someone's daughter, someone who deserves the same respect you would expect for yourself." His words hung in the air, the message clear but not unkind. He gestured toward Claire, who stood a few steps behind him, still maintaining her composure. "Claire isn't just a waitress," he said, his voice softening slightly. "She's a hard-working young woman who treats every customer with care and professionalism, no matter how she's treated in return. And, more importantly, she's my niece. She carries the values I hold dear: respect, dignity, and humility." Meredith shifted in her seat, her face pale. She opened her mouth as if to respond, but no words came out. Michael leaned in slightly, his voice dropping just enough to make the moment feel personal. This restaurant wasn't built to cater to entitlement. It was built as a space where people from all walks of life can come together, share a meal, and leave feeling better than when they arrived. But that only works if we treat each other with decency. Meredith's companions exchanged uneasy glances, their earlier laughter and confidence long gone. The eyes of the other diners were on her now, but Michael's gaze never wavered. "Everyone has bad days," he added, his tone softening just slightly. "But that doesn't give us the right to take it out on others, and it certainly doesn't justify the way you treated Claire tonight." Meredith finally looked up, her expression a mix of shame and disbelief. For a moment, it seemed as though she might offer an apology, but instead she nodded mutely, unable to find the words to defend herself. Michael straightened, his hands resting lightly on the back of a chair. "I hope tonight has given you something to think about," he said simply, "because the way we treat others says far more about us than it does about them." With that, he turned back to Claire, his face softening as he addressed her. "You've been incredible tonight," he said, his voice filled with pride. "I couldn't be more proud of how you've handled yourself." Claire offered a small, grateful smile, her posture relaxing slightly as her uncle's words gave her the validation she hadn't realized she needed. As Michael stepped away from Meredith's table, the restaurant began to hum with quiet murmurs. Diners exchanged glances, some nodding subtly in agreement, others looking toward Claire with newfound admiration. Meredith, however, remained seated, her earlier confidence shattered. For the first time in a long time, she had been made to reflect on her behavior, and the lesson was one she wouldn't forget anytime soon. The restaurant was silent as Meredith left, her usual commanding presence replaced by a humbled air. Patrons avoided her gaze, her deliberate steps echoing across the polished floor as the doors shut behind her. The room seemed to exhale collectively. Michael turned to the staff, his tone warm. "Thank you for your hard work tonight. Especially you, Claire." Claire blinked, caught off guard, as her coworkers chimed in with praise. "You were amazing," Lily said. "I don't think I could have stayed so composed." Michael placed a hand on Claire's shoulder. "I'm proud of you, not just for tonight, but for the strength and grace you show every day." Claire nodded, emotion flickering across her face. "Thank you," she said quietly. The diners, witnessing the moment, offered small smiles and a few soft claps. The tension dissolved, leaving the restaurant filled with a new warmth, one of unity, respect, and dignity. For the first time, Claire felt truly seen. This story is a reminder of the impact our actions have on others and the strength it takes to rise above disrespect. Have you ever witnessed or experienced a moment like this? How did it shape your perspective? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more powerful stories that inspire reflection and change. Together, we can keep these important conversations alive.